Can gods die? If their name is Thor, evidently they can. It seems strange for someone who's quite recently called the Immortal Thor, but even in that run, they make it clear that even immortals can die. But no one dies quite like Thor. You see, I was reading God Bomb by Jason Aaron, and at the end, spoilers, Thor dies fighting Gorr the God Butcher, and the narrator says that this is the 9th time that can be remembered that Thor has died. 9 times! What? How? Is he a cat? Even Goku would be jealous of those numbers. And that story only came out in 2013. Would you believe it if I told you that since then, Thor has died numerous times? That's right, and with the MCU recently putting up death flags for Thor, I don't think there's a better time than now to go back and take a look at the many deaths of Thor. So be sure to like and subscribe, because today we are not only going to figure out the 9 times Thor died that can be remembered, but the total number of times he has died in the 616 continuity. To start off, we obviously have Thor God of Thunder 13, in which Thor dies after absorbing the God Bomb into himself and uses that power to attack Gorr, after which he was resurrected by King Thor. This gives us a starting point, but now we need to figure out the 8 times he died before this. One of those times is evidently Secret Wars, in which Doctor Doom with the Beyonder's powers kills all the heroes in the event, only for them to be later revived due to an extremely lucky scenario playing out largely in part to Doom's omnipotent powers, causing his doubts to become reality. After this, we have Avengers Annual 16, in which the Grandmaster forces the heroes into a deadly game where they have to stop 5 bombs, each of which will destroy a fifth of the universe, all while fighting resurrected enemies. Now, Thor manages to contain the explosion of one of the bombs, but dies in the process. At the end of the games, a fifth of the universe was destroyed, and all the heroes except for Hawkeye and Captain America were killed. The Grandmaster then announces that was only round 1, but having enough of this nonsense, Hawkeye tricks the Grandmaster into losing at a carnival game instead, and this allows Death to break free and stop the Grandmaster, also resurrecting everyone in the process as thanks for freeing her. Now, we cannot speak of Thor's death without mentioning his prophesized death fighting against a Midgard serpent. In Fear itself, however, this prophecy gets turned on its head as it's revealed that Thor is actually prophesied to die fighting his uncle, Kull Borson, the god of fear, who goes by the moniker, the Serpent. As such, at the climax of the event, Thor wields the Odin sword into battle and successfully fells the Serpent at the cost of his own life. After which, Thor will be sent into a realm of forgotten gods to be eaten by the Demogorge. But after destroying the Demogorge's heart, Thor escapes from this dimension and returns back to life. Finally, as with all Norse gods, Thor dies in Ragnarok, which came in the pages of Thor Disassembled. In this comic, Ragnarok comes to Asgard. All of Thor's enemies have their own Mjolnirs and are killing Asgardians left and right, leading to Thor, king of Asgard, to undergo the same ritual Odin did when he sacrificed his eye to gain the knowledge of the runes. And with the Well of Knowledge demanding greater sacrifice, Thor sacrifices both his eyes and hangs himself from Yggdrasil. Afterwards, Thor breaks free from his chains and dies. I don't know if it was the hanging or the fall, but bro, he's dead. But not to worry, as Odin's spirit rescues Thor from the grips of Hela, and as such, he is reborn as Rune King Thor. Realizing that all the Asgardians have been played like puppets, being as they are born, they live, they die in Ragnarok, only for the cycle to repeat, and each time the cycle repeats, they become paler imitations of themselves. And this is happening due to the ones who sit above in shadows. Mysterious elder gods who feed on the energies of Ragnarok, and as such, have condemned the Asgardians to an infinite cycle of Ragnarok. Rune King Thor, upon learning of this cycle, decides the only solution is to give his people a proper death, severing the thread looping together the loom of fate and causing Yggdrasil to collapse in on itself, killing everyone and destroying all of the 9 realms. Except Midgard, because they have plot armor. And the story ends with Thor resting after finally having liberated his people, and they show his face being made out of stars. Now, Thor eventually comes back, of course, you can't keep a good man down, am I right? When Donald Blake finds Thor in the void and convinces him to resurrect himself and his people. Bro, Thor was wildin'. Nah, I'm bored. I'm gonna bring myself back to life is a crazy flex. Side note, in Immortal Thor, they state several times that Thor still has the knowledge of the runes, so this creates the possibility that this Thor is actually just Rune King Thor. And on top of that, he also steals Zeus's powers in this run, so do you know how insanely powerful this makes Thor if true? Because the ones who sit above in shadow were once speculated to be Beyonders, and the ones who sit above in shadow feared Rune King Thor's power. And it's possible, Immortal Thor is even more powerful than that. All I'm saying is, Thor has the potential to just be cracked, alright? Anyways, that is all the major Thor deaths before God Bomb. But that still only brings us up to 6 deaths. To hit 9, we're gonna have to get creative. In Thor 296, Thor is told of a story of how Odin once took mortal form and had twins, Sigmund and Siglinda. But Sigmund was actually Thor incarnated in mortal form. Sigmund eventually slept with Siglinda, breaking her marriage vows with her abusive husband, causing Frigga, the goddess of marriage and Odin's wife, to demand Odin kill Sigmund to protect her honor. As such, Odin took control of Siglinda's husband and killed Sigmund. AKA, Odin killed his own son to avenge his wife's honor after his son slept with his daughter. Gods, man, am I right? So, that makes 7 deaths, but it doesn't stop there. You see, Siglinda was pregnant and died giving birth to her son Siegfried, who's actually Thor reincarnated, making him Odin's son and his grandson, by the way. Long story short, Sigmund is invulnerable everywhere except his back, and one day he is betrayed and stabbed in the back and dies, only to later be resurrected by Odin as Thor once again. But yeah, that makes 8 deaths. Getting 9 deaths is going to be a bit more difficult, alright? But I think I found a way. You see, the Ragnarok cycle has repeated before, such as when Ragnarok happened during Walt Simonson's run. But Thor didn't die there. However, we do see Thor die in a former Ragnarok cycle in which a red-haired Thor is killed by the Midgard serpent. In this tale, the 5 survivors of Ragnarok fuse into a new Odin who resurrects the Asgardians in their current forms. Now, there's some doubt as to the validity of this story, as it is told by Odin's eyeball, and Buri himself questions whether the story is accurate, especially since it takes place during Jesus' birth 2,000 years ago, when we know for a fact Thor was born in 1 million BC. Although, we do know that Thor has died in at least one prior Ragnarok cycle. Honestly, it's probably more than one, but still, if we take the time period of the story to be the only thing that's inaccurate, then we can say that there's at least one death from a previous Ragnarok cycle that's remembered. As such, finally bringing us to the aforementioned 9 deaths. Well, with that test done, the question still remains, how many times has Thor died since then? Well, for starters, remember how I mentioned Avengers 1 million BC? Well, in that story, Thor is born and then frozen to death by Laufey, king of the Frost Giants, only to be brought back to life by the Phoenix Force. And that would bring us up to 10 deaths. And while chronologically it does take place before God Bomb, this comic came out years after, so it wouldn't be counted amongst the 9 remembered deaths. Next, in New Avengers 23, unworthy Thor and the Avengers face against the Beyonders. They defeat the initial assault at great cost, leaving only Thor and Hyperion alive, when a whole army of Beyonders attack, leaving Thor and Hyperion to make one last stand before ultimately falling. After this, we have AXE Judgment Day, a story in which a celestial named the Progenitor declares humanity unworthy and begins committing global genocide. During the fight against it, Thor confronts the Progenitor, and it says that while Thor is worthy, humanity is not, and then effortlessly kills him. Later, when the Progenitor declares itself unworthy, it resurrects everyone it killed. Following this, we get Avengers Annual 2024, in which Thanos is hunting the Infinity Stones and attacks the Stone Bearers. During this confrontation, Captain Marvel and Thor are trying to protect the Stone Bearers, but Thanos smacks Thor aside and starts killing. Thor gets up, obviously, but by this point Thanos has 3 stones and instantly kills Thor. In the end, the bearer of the time stone creates a time paradox to force Thanos to retreat, and as a result, everyone who died was resurrected. Finally, we have our very own Immortal Thor 24, released on June 4th of this year. I'm telling you, this guy stays dying. In this one, the Immortal Thor wages war against the Elder Gods, and against all odds, he managed to kill his uncles and win the day. But during his moment of triumph, Loki stabs him through the back with an arrow made with a piece of eternity, killing Thor. You really do be your own people, bro. Anyways, Thor gets sent to Vidlane, the land of lost souls, and as a result of his death, everyone forgets Asgard ever existed. And in the void, he encounters Donald Blake, who Loki has recently tortured to become the new god of lies, as Loki no longer wanted the role, eventually becoming the god of stories himself. Now, Donald Blake starts attacking Thor, saying that Thor doesn't know pain, for what god can ever know pain? It's madness thinking you can learn humility from a distance, believing you can learn humanity while taking little breaks for godhood, imagining that you can die, suddenly, inevitably, in pain, in love, in the middle of things, die as a human must die, and still be here. Arrogance with a smile is still arrogance, and a kindly king is still a king. Some lessons you can only learn through sacrifice. Which, Loki, he has a point, bro. Like, humans died, that's the end. Thor has died over a dozen times and he's still here. Loki a little unfair. Anyways, Thor claims Blake says Thor is too much the immortal, while Blake embraces the role Loki set for him. So by his count, if they are both gods and neither mortal, then between the two of them, there's one human soul that goes to spare. And as such, Thor steals Blake's human soul and is reborn as the mortal Thor. And this is the most recent death Thor has had. I mean, I would hope he hasn't died in like the 3 months since then. But, you know, with this guy, you never know. Marvel's Kenny, for real, for real.
Oh my god! They killed
Thor.
You bastards!
But with this, the final count of the number of times 616 Thor has died is 14 times. Also meaning, he has died 6 times in the last 12 years for the record. The final thing I want to mention in this video are a few notable deaths from some alternate Thors. In Marvel Zombies, Thor is infected and then killed by Giant Man. In Age of Apocalypse, Donald Blake never finds Mjolnir and dies by falling out a window. In Days of Future Past, Thor is killed by a Sentinel. In Old Man Logan, Thor is killed by the Absorbing Man. In Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, Deadpool shrinks Thor and crushes him with his own hammer. Ultimate Thor sacrifices his own soul to Hela in exchange for Valkyrie's life, only to later be revived by Loki. There's a What If story that features Rogue killing Thor and stealing his powers, and Thor also dies in a What If episode. In Infinity Finale, Thor dies alongside Thanos in a last stand against the Nihilists. In Thanos Wins, Thanos kills Thor, and finally, King Thor dies by sacrificing his life to restart life in the universe. With all this said, if Thor bites the bullet in Secret Wars, you can confidently look at all the MCU fans and say,
first time.
Well, that's all I got for you today, folks. Be sure to smash that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.